The desert wind howled that night, a mournful song that carried across the empty plains. Under the silver light of the moon, the Apache woman lay on the cold earth, her body broken from the ambush. Arrows and bullets had rained down on her people, and though she had fought with the fierceness of her ancestors, her strength had finally given way. As the stars blurred in her vision, she closed her eyes, whispering her final prayer to the Great Spirit, ready to walk into the shadowed path of her ancestors. But when her eyes fluttered open again, she was not beneath the sky. Instead, she found herself in a dimly lit room, the smell of smoke and leather thick in the air. A wool blanket, coarse but warm, covered her, and the steady crackle of a fire whispered from a stone hearth. Panic surged within her until she realized the weight of her wounds had been tended. Bandages wrapped her shoulder, and her side no longer bled freely. Then she saw him. A man sat nearby, leaning back in a wooden chair with his boots crossed at the ankles. His hat shaded most of his face, but the lamplight revealed the rough lines of a cowboy, weathered skin, a day's stubble, and a pistol resting easy on his thigh, as though it were part of him. He was watching her, not with suspicion but with a guarded curiosity. "You're awake," he said, his voice low and steady, the kind of tone used by men who had stared death in the eye too many times. Her throat burned, but she managed a rasp of words in broken English. "Why not dead?" He tilted his head, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Found you out there. Figured the coyotes didn't deserve you." Her pulse quickened, not from fear of him, but from the realization of what it meant. She was alive, but in the hands of a cowboy. To her people, men like him were enemies, riders who had stolen land, burned villages, and left trails of sorrow. Yet this man had saved her when he could have left her to die. She tried to push herself up, but pain ripped through her ribs, forcing her back against the bedding. He rose quickly, setting a firm hand on her shoulder to keep her still. His touch was rough, calloused, but not unkind. "You'll tear the stitches if you move," he warned. "Lie still. You've got more fight left in you than most, but you ain't ready to stand just yet." Her dark eyes narrowed, mistrust battling with a faint ember of gratitude. "Why help me? Apache and Cowboy not friends." His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. "Maybe I'm tired of how things are. Maybe I don't much care for the killing anymore. Or maybe," he leaned back, shrugging lightly, "maybe I just saw a woman who deserved a chance to breathe another sunrise." The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the distant cry of a coyote under the moon. She studied him. The way his shoulders bore invisible burdens, the faint scar across his jaw, the steadiness of a man who had seen too much yet carried it all without complaint. He was unlike the raiders and gunmen she had imagined. When sleep threatened to pull her under again, she clung to one thought. The world was not as simple as she had been taught. Enemies could save you. Strangers could become the rope that pulled you back from death. And for the first time since the ambush, she wondered if her story was not ending, but only just beginning. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the cabin's rough shutters. She stirred, her body aching but alive, and found him already at work, saddling his horse, his movements precise, efficient. He noticed her watching, and with a nod, he said, "We've got a long road ahead, you and me. Question is, do you trust me enough to ride it?" Her heart pounded, torn between the blood of her people and the strange new bond forming, like an unspoken pact in the room. She did not answer right away, but her eyes, fierce, unbroken, and searching, told him everything he needed to know. Her silence lingered like a blade's edge between them, sharp and heavy, but he didn't press her for words. Instead, he tightened the cinch on his saddle and adjusted the rifle strapped to the horse's flank. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of mesquite and smoke, and the faint thrum of the desert waking under the sun. She shifted beneath the blanket, testing her strength again. Her side burned, but she refused to show weakness. Apache women were raised to endure storms that broke lesser souls. He poured water from a canteen into a tin cup and set it beside her. "Drink," he said. "The desert takes more than bullets if you don't." She eyed the cup, suspicion still flickering in her gaze. Poison was not unknown in these lands, and yet something in his calm, matter-of-fact voice disarmed her doubts. Slowly, she reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly. The water was cool against her lips, life itself trickling down her parched throat. She drank deeply, though her eyes never left him. "What is your name, Cowboy?" she asked, her voice hoarse. He paused, one hand resting on the saddle horn, then turned to face her fully. "Name's Colton Hayes. Folks around here call me Hayes." His eyes narrowed, studying her in turn. "And you?" She hesitated. Among her people, names held power, not given lightly to strangers. But this man had stitched her wounds, carried her from death's edge. At last she said softly, "Nita." He repeated it once, letting the syllables roll off his tongue like a word foreign but not unwelcome. "Nita." A small nod followed, almost like respect. "Fitting. Means bear, don't it?" Her eyes widened slightly. Few white men bothered to learn the tongue of her people. She didn't answer, but the faintest flicker of acknowledgement crossed her face. Hayes strapped a bedroll onto the horse, his movements deliberate, patient, like a man who knew silence could say more than questions ever could. Finally, he spoke again, not looking at her this time. "The men who ambushed you, still out there. Riders from the south, bounty hunters mostly. They'll come sniffing round for survivors. That's why we can't stay here long." Her pulse quickened. Images of the ambush returned, her people scattered, blood soaking the sand, the cries of the wounded cut short by gunfire. She pressed a hand to her side, the pain flaring as if to remind her of the truth. "My family," she whispered, though she knew the answer. Hayes' jaw tightened. He didn't look at her, just adjusted the reins. "I buried who I found. You were the only one still breathing." The words struck her like a hammer, yet no tears came. The Apache did not weep in front of outsiders. Her grief was a fire locked deep inside, to be carried like coals in the heart. But he must have sensed it, for he said nothing more. The silence between them grew, but it was no longer hostile, it was shared. He finished with the horse, then crouched beside her. "You can't ride alone yet. You'll ride with me till you're strong enough. But we've got to move before sundown. Can you hold on?" Nita met his gaze, her pride flaring. "I am not weak," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. A faint smile ghosted his lips. "Didn't say you were. Just making sure you don't fall off and get trampled." He rose, offering a hand. "Come on, Bear. Let's get you on your feet." The nickname startled her, but she took his hand, her small fingers gripping his rough palm. He lifted her carefully, steadying her as her knees buckled. The pain was sharp, but she gritted her teeth, forcing herself upright. His arms circled her waist, strong and sure, and together they stepped into the sunlight. The land stretched wide before them, rolling desert broken by scrub brush and red rock, endless under the blaze of the morning sun. For a moment, Nita felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her. She had been left to die, yet here she stood beside a man who should have been her enemy. The world had shifted in ways neither of them could yet understand. Hayes mounted his horse with practiced ease, then reached down for her. She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. He pulled her up, settling her in front of him. The leather creaked, the animal shifted beneath them, and she felt the unfamiliar heat of his chest at her back. It was strange, unsettling, and yet not unwelcome. They rode slowly at first, his arm braced lightly around her to steady her balance. The rhythm of the horse carried them forward, each hoofbeat a reminder that she was not dead. Not yet. She breathed in the scent of dust and horsehair, of gun oil and leather, and beneath it all, the faint trace of something human in him that she couldn't name. After some miles, she asked quietly, "Where are you taking me?" "North," he said simply. "There's a place near the river. Safe for a spell. After that, we'll see." "And then," she pressed, turning her head slightly. He looked out over the horizon, his eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. Then, Nita, you decide. You can go your way and I'll go mine. But until then, we ride together. Her heart twisted, torn between distrust and something else, something dangerous that stirred when his voice dipped low, when his arms steadied her against the horse's stride. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself not to lean into him. The wind rose, carrying with it the distant echo of gunshots. Faint, but real. Hayes stiffened behind her, his hand tightening on the reins. Riders, he muttered. Closer than I'd like. Nita's blood ran cold. She knew those gunshots. They belonged to men who hunted for gold, scalp, or bounty. Her enemies, his enemies, perhaps both. Her hand instinctively went to her side, where no weapon waited. Hayes felt the movement. Without a word, he pressed a revolver into her palm. Heavy, cold iron rested against her skin. She looked at him, startled. Figure you'll need it, he said. Trust goes both ways. Her fingers closed around the weapon, its weight foreign yet strangely comforting. For the first time since waking in his cabin, she felt something stir in her chest, a fragile thread of alliance, spun between them like silk stretched across a canyon. The hoofbeats behind them grew louder. Hayes urged the horse forward, his voice low but firm in her ear. Hold on, Bear. Looks like our road just got rough. The sound of hoofbeats thundered across the desert, closer and closer, until Nita could almost feel the vibration in her bones. Hayes urged the horse harder, his arms steady around her, but the riders behind were skilled, relentless men who smelled blood and coin. Dust rose on the horizon like a storm. She gripped the revolver tightly, her knuckles white, her heart beating as though it might tear itself from her chest. The canyon walls loomed ahead, jagged red stone cutting into the sky. Hayes' eyes darted across the land, calculating, searching for an escape. We make it through the pass, we've got a chance, he muttered, more to himself than her. His voice was calm, but she could feel the tension in his body, coiled like a mountain cat ready to strike. The riders drew nearer, shouts carried on the wind, the metallic glint of rifles catching the sun. One shot cracked, echoing through the canyon, the bullet whistling past her ear. She flinched, but Hayes only leaned lower over her shoulder. Steady, Bear. Don't waste bullets till you see the whites of their eyes. The horse pounded into the narrow pass, stone rising like cathedral walls on either side. The world became an echo chamber of hoofbeats and gunfire, the cries of men chasing them bouncing off the canyon walls. Nita turned, raising the revolver with both hands, her wounds screaming in protest. Her first shot went wide, sparks flying from rock. She bit her lip, tasting blood, forcing herself to steady. The second shot rang true. One of the riders fell from his saddle, his body tumbling hard into the dust. The others pressed harder. Hayes fired over her shoulder, each shot measured, controlled, a marksman born from years of survival. Another rider went down, then another, but still more came, their faces twisted with hunger for the kill. Nita's blood sang. Pain and fear fused into something fierce, something her ancestors had carried in their hearts long before her. She was no helpless woman clinging to survival. She was Apache, born of warriors, and this man at her back was no longer the enemy. Together, they were a storm. At the narrowest part of the pass, Hayes yanked the reins, driving the horse into a sharp turn that sent rocks skittering down the canyon wall. Behind them, the riders bunched too close. Two collided, horses screaming as they tumbled into the dust, their rifles scattering. Another bullet grazed Hayes' hat, the wind of death whispering close, but he didn't flinch. Now, Nita, he shouted. She fired again, the blast echoing like thunder in the canyon. Another man fell. Her chest heaved, her body trembling from exertion and pain, but her spirit blazed bright. Each shot was not just survival, it was vengeance for the blood spilled, for the family buried beneath desert sand. When the smoke cleared and the dust began to settle, only two riders remained. They slowed their pursuit, unwilling to push deeper into the twisting pass. One raised a fist, signaling retreat, their faces dark with frustration as they wheeled their horses away. The sound of their retreating hoofbeats faded into silence, swallowed by the endless desert. Nita lowered the revolver slowly, her arms shaking, her breath ragged. Hayes reined in the horse, allowing it to trot to a stop near a patch of shade beneath the canyon's lip. For a long moment, neither spoke, the silence broken only by the horse's heavy breathing. Finally, Hayes let out a long exhale, running a hand down his face. "Well, Bear," he said with a weary chuckle, "looks like you can shoot straighter than half the men I've ridden with." Despite the ache in her ribs, Nita allowed herself a faint, fleeting smile. It was the first since she had woken in his cabin. "You did not save me," she whispered, her voice fierce though soft. "We saved each other." His eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words, forged in fire and blood. Whatever lines had once divided them, whatever history lay between Apache and Cowboy, had burned away in that canyon. What remained was something raw, fragile, and undeniable. They rode on in silence as the sun began to set, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson. The land stretched endless before them, wild and unforgiving, yet strangely full of promise. Hayes' arm rested easy around her now, no longer out of necessity, but of choice. She leaned back just slightly, no longer resisting the strange pull of fate that had bound them together. Night fell, and stars bloomed across the sky like scattered fire. They made camp near the river, the water glistening under the moonlight. Hayes built a small fire, its glow flickering across his weathered face. Nita sat beside him, her blanket wrapped tight, watching the flames dance. At last he spoke, his voice low. "You asked me why I saved you. Truth is, I don't rightly know. Maybe I was tired of being alone out here. Maybe I wanted to do one damn thing right before the desert swallows me whole." He paused, eyes fixed on the fire. "But now I think, maybe I was waiting to cross paths with you." The words sank deep into her, stirring something she had buried beneath years of loss and survival. She did not answer, not with words. Instead, she reached out, her hand brushing his, the smallest gesture, yet filled with more weight than any vow. He didn't pull away. The desert wind rose, carrying with it the timeless song of the land. In that moment, Nita understood. Fate had taken everything from her, only to place her at the side of a man who should have been her enemy, yet had become her ally, her shield, perhaps something more. The world outside their fire was still dangerous, full of riders and hunters and men who lived for blood. But here, within the circle of flame, there was something the desert could not steal. A fragile peace. A bond forged in survival. And as the stars wheeled silently above them, Nita closed her eyes, not to die this time, but to dream of the road ahead. A road not walked in solitude, but side by side, Apache and Cowboy, against whatever storms the Wild West would dare to throw their way.